Good. All right, I was going to introduce myself, but I think I know every single face here, so I'll just dive right in. I got to know Ricky and Krista a little bit last summer. I've been in and out of town all of this summer, so if I don't know any of you, I think there's one person in the back. I'm Caroline. But I was in and out of town all of last summer as well, so I just hung out with them intermittently, but wasn't really involved in Meta yet. And then last September, I started attending and got more involved. And apparently, the first couple times I hung out with them, I called myself awkward, like labeled myself awkward. And it was just in passing, almost in a humorous way. It wasn't anything like serious or real drab. But Krista noticed it enough to say something to me. So Krista and I went and had a coffee date over at Frenchie's. And if you've ever had like a serious conversation with Krista, she like, her eyes like pierced your soul. And she sat down and looked at me and got straight to the point. And she was like, "Why do you think you're awkward?" "Because you're not." And I just remember I kind of laughed at first, like, "Oh, ha, ha, ha." Like I felt awkward when she asked me that. And then I just sort of felt terrified, like this woman sees me, like she knows type thing. Because I knew that was something very deep inside of me that I thought I concealed from other people. And this woman that at the time I barely knew saw that in me, and I was very afraid that she saw it, but I knew I had this like deep inner feeling in that moment, like this woman God is going to change my life through this woman, and this conversation is going to spark a lot in me that is about to change. I was very afraid, but it needed to change and was about to change. So I'm going to tell you about my life leading up to that coffee date and how I became awkward and what has happened since. I grew up on a camp, a Young Life camp to be specific. My dad builds and develops summer camps, so I had a really wonderful childhood. We lived in northern Michigan. I had 800 acres as my backyard. We had like a lake, a blob, a rope swing, a zip line, a game room. Like I literally had the best childhood. I'm very, very thankful for it. And I was just like a free little girl. I was so uninhibited. I never wore shoes. I like danced around camp all the time. I was just like brave and daring and silly. I used to bet high school boys that I could beat them in ping pong, and then if I won, I'd make them buy me a milkshake at the snack shack. Like I was just like I was an entertainer, and I was just completely like uninhibited is the word that I would most describe myself as. And then when I was 14 years old, my family got the assignment to move to North Carolina to build another camp. And at that point, my siblings are much older than me, so we moved there, just me and my mom and my dad. I was siblingless. And for multiple reasons, we didn't live on the camp property. We lived in the closest town, which was about 30 minutes away. So for the first time in my life, I didn't live on camp, like in my familiar space. I'd never lived in a town before. And it was a small, like very southern town, a lot of country folk. And I started high school there. I moved there like 3 days before high school. I started high school there. And I made good friends. Like people were nice to me. It wasn't like a big scene of like the new girl being left out. But I did just feel different, really kind of different for the first time in my life, and it was a bad different. And they lovingly teased me about being like a Yankee or a hippie, which I definitely was at the time and still am a little bit maybe. But I just remember feeling different. I also was getting really serious with my dancing at that time and danced like 6 days a week, about an hour away. So I couldn't be involved with them after school, and they kind of teased me about that, almost about being so obsessed with my passion. So there's just all these little things, like I wasn't bullied, but there's just these little tiny things that kind of made me feel different and separated from my friends at school. And I never got like that close to them. I kind of held them at arm's length because I felt like I couldn't share like completely who I was. I just stifled myself like the tiniest bit with them because they didn't really accept or love that I was like a hippie or had a passion or was from the North. Very little things, but I just didn't give them like my 100% uninhibited Caroline that I was in Michigan. And then when I was 18, I moved here. Was not ready for that. In hindsight, really not ready. And I was a very small fish in a huge pond. My talent as a dancer was very intimidated for the first time. And I went to Mary Mountain in college along with a lot of people in this room. And it's a very liberal place, and it was just so, everyone was different than me, like in what they believed, in our speech, in our actions, in our mindset, in our motivations. I mean, I felt like an island. Like everyone was just different. And I made good friends. Like I was randomly paired with 3 girls, and I was roommates. We became tight friends. Again, like no one was mean to me. It wasn't horrible, but as the months went by, my freshman year, I just felt so like lonely and secluded because no one was, although I had friends and people were nice to me, no one was like on my team or like backing me, really believing the same thing. And I sort of began to shrink more parts of my personality in order to just sort of fit in. I wasn't thinking like, oh, I need to fit in, but I just wasn't also like letting myself completely be free and live because no one was on my side. And as the years went on, I was very much put in a box at my school. I was like the sweet one, the Christian girl. One of our friends even lovingly called me the Virgin Mary, like as a joke. Like all these people loved me. Like they weren't being mean. They just had me in a box of like what they thought that I was. And I wasn't helping myself by showing them any different. Two of my very best friends at school very much excelled in dance, like from the get-go. They're probably two of the most talented people in our class. And I, in my effort to love and support them, like just highlighted them and kind of gave them focus just like everyone else, and very much dismissed myself. Like I thought I was being humble, but really I was just, I don't know, I just kind of dismissed myself like, oh yeah, they are great. I'm going to love and support them because that's what the loving and supporting friend does. And I genuinely wanted to, but I just very much like dismissed my own talent and put the spotlight on them. And then my junior year, I decided to really help myself out and date a complete jerk. Woo. I fell very, very hard for this person. Some of you in the room can attest. And he just made me feel so like insignificant and worthless. And he was like everything I wanted, but I was never exactly what he wanted. And I just started to eliminate a lot of my like opinions on things. I just wanted to be agreeable with him and like the cool girl that was kind of like down for whatever he wanted. And then even still, when I tried to be down, he still didn't like me. It was like no matter what I could do, I just was never enough for him. And I actually lied a lot to the people that really knew me that year because I was so ashamed of like how much I'd just let myself go for this guy that didn't even give a rip about me. And then my senior year, this was kind of I wouldn't say a breaking point, but just a significant moment where I was like, wow, Caroline. We had our dance evaluations as a senior. You meet with multiple people in the faculty and just kind of talk about your 4 years there and what happened and where you're going and all that good stuff. And I was sitting there with 3 faculty members, and one of whom I had a great rapport with. I really respected this man. He was my ballet teacher. He was awesome. And they had talked about me for about 10 minutes so far, and it kind of got to him, and he just looked at me and he was like, Caroline, you are too humble to ever succeed. And I remember just wanting to like stand up and shout and be like, no, I'm not. Like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm bold and I'm audacious and I am talented and like I can do this, this, and this. But I felt like chained to my chair. And then just realizing like I wanted to stand up and do those things, but like I couldn't. And then realizing kind of how much I lost myself, so much as that those 3 people that had watched me for 4 years like didn't see any of that in me. So like that was just kind of a horrible realization. But after thinking about it, I don't know if humble is the right word I would use there, but this professor was right. Like he was just stating what he saw. He wasn't trying to be rude to me. I just actually believed that I was like odd and awkward and spineless and shy and naive, all these things. I developed weird little social anxieties and quirks and honestly compromised my dance dream. And then I kind of thought those things would go away when I left Marymount. Like that was just a toxic environment and I struggled with all those things there. But when I graduated, I just like enter the new life and do whatever I want. I'd be free, it'd be great. That was not the case. And it really, all these things that I had kind of compiled on myself, these labels that I chose to believe and let myself wear of these things that I was or thought I was, really kind of escalated the years after college. And they definitely carried over to other environments that I was in. And then honestly, meeting Steven, he has insane dreams that I thought were like so unattainable and ridiculous when I met him, but he's just audacious about it and is like, well, God told me this, it's gonna happen. So meeting him and seeing that and then falling in love with him and creating dreams together about like what we wanted in our future and our future family, I genuinely wanted all these big things we would talk about, but I was just like terrified of getting there. Like I wanted them deep in here and was like, he was kind of pulling me on his bandwagon, but I was like, oh, I don't know how to get there. Like that scares the crap out of me. I don't know about that. But I can honestly say, in the last year, God has brought me back to that little girl that used to like run so freely. I'm not gonna cry, guys. I just feel confident and mainly free. I feel like relaxed. I feel bold. I feel funny again. And I'm just more, I think I've always been a joyous person, but my joy is like tenfold. So yes, praise God. But here's the thing. I was not like at rock bottom. I wasn't going off the deep end. A lot of you, don't cry, a lot of you in this room lived through all this with me, and it's the first you're hearing about it. But God saw, sorry, I'm really going to try and collect myself for a second. God saw the baggage I was carrying and what he had for my future, and they just didn't line up. And he knew that if I didn't shed these things, that I would never achieve like all the crazy, ridiculous plans he has for my life. Thanks. I'm going to read you guys some scripture from Ephesians. Ephesians 3:20. God can do anything, you know, far more than you could ever imagine or guess or request in your wildest dreams. He does it not by pushing us around, but by working within us. His Spirit deeply and gently within us. My parents used to kind of like speak this over me as a child. They would call me their Ephesians 3:20 baby. And it used to, I used to love it. It used to like pump me up in middle school and high school. I'd be like, yeah, that's me. I can do that. Like, I'm going to change the world. I'm an activist, all this fun stuff. And then as I got into college, that verse started to terrify me, like I've already sort of explained to you. And now I was kind of thinking of a verse to tie in to this message. And like just reading it again and reading it even now, like I'm just pumped again. Like nothing about that scares me because of what God has done in my life. And like he has shed those things, so I can be pumped about that. And so I can achieve like all that he's made me to do. A really important takeaway is my last shebang for you guys, is that, and this is really, if you're relating to me right now, like really listen to this. This is important. Those people that spoke those things to me or over me are not the enemy. My ex-boyfriend's not the enemy. That college professor's not the enemy. Satan is the enemy. And if you let yourself listen to him, you will slowly but surely just be suffocated. Only God knows who you really are because he made you. So I want to leave you with some questions. You can write them down if you so choose. What voices have you listened to or are currently listening to that are not in God's character? What voices have you listened to or are currently listening to that are not in God's character? Number 2, have you asked God what he thinks about you? Have you asked God what he thinks about you? And I just really believe if you focus on these things, add in a ton of prayer and really good friends, that you'll find yourself on a path to really knowing and believing, not just knowing, but believing your true identity, who God says you are. And then you'll just unlock everything that he's made you for. That's it.